I think the reason the hero's journey works is because it's just so intuitive. You only have to look at the image of the different stages and you already kind of have a solid grasp on it. So in its most simplified form, the different stages of the hero's journey are: number 1, the hero lives in the ordinary world. Number 2, the hero receives a call to adventure. Number 3, and this is optional, the hero refuses the call. Number 4, the hero meets a mentor who guides them. Number 5, the hero crosses the threshold into the special world. Number 6, the hero faces tests, allies, and enemies along the way. Number 7, the hero approaches the inmost cave where the final challenge awaits. Number 8, the hero faces the ordeal and gains a reward. Number 9, the hero begins the journey back to the ordinary world. Number 10, the hero faces a final test or resurrection. Number 11, the hero returns with a boon or elixir for themselves or others. Number 12, the hero is transformed by the experience. The steps themselves in the hero's journey are not super strict. You'll find different revisions of it that differ from the original Joseph Campbell text. But even then, they're not really that different. So I don't think you should worry too much about following it to a T. Keep in mind that the hero's journey came from looking at different myths from different cultures, so it's kind of an intuitive way of telling stories anyway. You don't even really need to know what it is to have a natural inclination to tell a story in this way. But I think especially if you're having troubles with your story, as I did, it's very helpful to look at it and think, how does this apply to my story? Do I have these steps? Am I missing a step? Why am I missing it? Now, it goes without saying that you can't really use the hero's journey for every story type. If you're telling a weird, non-linear story about dropping acid, or you're writing some erotic thriller about spies in World War II, it's probably not going to work that well. The usefulness in following these different stages is really in the name itself. It's about the hero, how you make one. While we could talk about a lot of different aspects of the hero's journey, I really want to focus on 2 things in particular. Number 1, the point of no return really has no return. A prevalent thing in a lot of bad stories is that things just kind of happen. The point in the hero's journey is that the hero doesn't want to go anywhere. This isn't a character that's sitting around with bated breath for the next star cruiser that will take them on a wild adventure. No, this is a character that is well situated, that might have dreams of traveling, but who's ultimately comfortable in their current life, or is at least so deeply enmeshed in it that they wouldn't really go anywhere. What happens is that there's a major event that causes everything to unravel and forces the hero to go on their journey. You can call this the disturbance. Emphasis on force. This is not a willing departure. Not forced in the sense that they're being kidnapped, but forced in a situation where they can really only make one choice if they want to stay true to their values. Of course, what happens in a lot of these story types, including Star Wars, which is iconic for being a hero's journey, is that the hero's home is completely destroyed, so there's nothing to go back to. If you think that's a bit too melodramatic, and I'd agree, and you'd rather do without homes being destroyed and family members being killed, then you should just focus on the psychological death that would come from rejecting this call to adventure. Consider, for example, a character that would be the only one strong enough to go and get this medicine that exists in some part of the world. They're not forced to go, they don't really need to go, but if they don't go, somebody important is going to die and they're going to feel guilty about it. They don't really have an option not to, even though technically they do. They can either risk physical death and go on the adventure, or they can guarantee spiritual death by doing nothing. Basically what I'm trying to say is that when you reach this part of your story, which I guess is like a quarter in usually, it should feel like there's no point of return. It's not really a choice at all. It has to happen. It seems almost fated. Everything pushes the character in this direction. There's no choice for the hero but to go on the journey. Number 2, self-reflection is key. A lot of authors kind of disregard the middle of stories. I think that's why they're also usually unengaging in books and just a series of action scenes in movies. But in the hero's journey especially, I think, around the middle point, you should have a moment in your story where the character suffers a huge shift in their self-perception. This is kind of like a revelation. It's about your character discovering a deeper truth about their nature that fundamentally changes how they see themselves. And I'll be honest, a lot of stories don't actually have this. It's very rare to find a heroic figure in a story that will have some transformative moment of character development that comes before the final confrontation. But you should have it, because if you don't, why have a middle point at all? You don't want to write a novel where half of it caught between the beginning and the end is a series of disconnected short stories that have no real bearing on either. It's important for your middle section to build up to something that leaves your character permanently transformed. This is the moment when the hero realizes that they're not really who they think they are. It's death and also rebirth. It's a profound change, but not the end. Imagine, if you will, a story about revenge. The middle point might see the hero apprehend a person that knows everything about the bad guy. Only problem is this person doesn't want to talk. So your hero has a choice and stands at a precipice. They're going to look deep inside themselves and ask, am I really the sort of person that tortures others for information? And there's no wrong answer either. Depending on your story and its themes, your main character might choose to do one or the other. And both could have potentially disastrous consequences. If they think they're above torturing people, it's possible that their friends and allies who are fanatical about getting the bad guy might think that they're a coward. In a traumatic event, they could lose all the allies who seemed fated to be by their side until the end of the story. But this moment could also make them realize that even though they do want revenge, and even though they do think the bad guy deserves the things that they have coming to them, it's not really enough of a justification to give up all sense of morality. It could actually strengthen their belief in justice and their drive to do the right thing. It could make the hero realize that even though they set out on this journey for personal revenge, it's actually more than that. It's a struggle for justice. And, on the contrary, if they do decide to torture that person for information, it will force them to reflect on the fact that they're not so good themselves, that they become someone else in the process of this quest, and that the person who left home, well, that person doesn't really exist anymore. But they found out who they really are, what they're made of, and what they're capable of. Again, I would focus on making this middle stage in your story a point of self-reflection. It's not about your character gaining powers of some kind, although I guess that's possible if they're selling their soul or something. The point is, it's the character's view of themselves that's fundamentally transformed here. It's a journey into the abyss of their own soul and having a good look at what comes out. Do not confuse this, by the way, for the lowest point you'll see mentioned in other creative writing guides. This isn't a difficult moment before the final confrontation where all hope seems lost and you're creating tension for the reader. In fact, it might be very low-key and very unexpected, but profoundly impactful for the hero alone. One thing I'd warn against, and this is really up to my personal preference, is that I don't like it when these moments involve other characters. I think that's kind of lame. Like, let's say you have a story about a girl, and she goes out to try and rescue her father, but in the middle of the story she actually finds out that her father is not her real biological father. Of course this would have a profound impact on her, and it could make her question whether or not it's worth going on the quest at all, but it's kind of obvious she has to go on with the quest, right? To me, these kinds of revelations that are built around interpersonal drama just seem kind of lame. It's just forced, unnecessary, and it doesn't fundamentally make the character look at themselves in a deeper way. It doesn't feel like they're using their autonomy to reshape themselves into a new person. At least it doesn't to me. I like it when a character makes a choice because they feel it's important, because they're in charge. This is also a nice contrast with the first part of the hero's journey where they're essentially forced out the door. Granted, again, this is my personal preference, but then this is my video. I think stories are compelling when they're a personal journey of self-discovery. I'm not there to see a dancing monkey learning to do tricks until they land on a trick that knocks out the bad guy. That's just not really fun to me. In conclusion, what should we really focus on when it comes to the hero's journey? In short, I would say that it's about a normal person being forced to go on a journey that leads to self-discovery, ultimate triumph, and a heroic return home. The key word you should always be thinking back to is that the hero's journey is transformative. To make it even simpler, we start out with a loser with no autonomy, and we watch them as step by step they become a hero. There's actually a scene in Lost that kind of sums up what I think the hero's journey is to me. And since I always like to talk about Lost or reference Lost at every opportunity, we're going to have a look at it. It's the scene where one of the main characters, Locke, is told to go on a walkabout. Of course, he has no idea what a walkabout is. And the explanation that comes, which I want you to think about in relation to the hero's journey, is
it's a journey of self-discovery. You go out into the Australian outback with nothing more than a knife and your wits. I went on my walkabout convinced I was one thing, but I came back another. I found out what I was made of, who I was.
I honestly think that sums up the spirit of the hero's journey better than anything else. Good luck on your own hero's journey as an author, as you're writing your first novel and discovering who you really are.